So my name is Nicole Arcuri Sanders. I am core faculty over at Capella University. Our topic today is telemental health interventions and making it innovative in regards to how do we implement these interventions using technology. As we all know, COVID-19, this pandemic has really created a push forward for even those who never even thought they would be using technology in their counseling settings to figure out new ways and to do it quickly. So we really hope that this session is going to give you some opportunities to walk out of here with some hands-on approaches, things you can use today, examples of how you'd walk through. I personally have used it in the clinical setting, as well as with students through supervision, as well as helping them quickly adapt to how do they provide telemental health services during this pandemic. Master students usually are, used to the face-to-face practicum internship experiences. However, when the pandemic hit, as many of you guys are probably going to know, there was this kind of standstill of what do we do now. So even trying to work with K-Prep and other accreditors to how do we meet the needs of counselors in training to be prepared to meet the needs of clients out there, as well as helping sites develop these new platforms to meet the needs of the community and the site that they have. So it's been kind of nice to be on both sides of the spectrum, using it from, learning points, education points, research, presentations, as well as with teaching those students how to implement them and working with sites to do so. I'm going to turn it over to Erika to give a little introduction of herself. And once again, thank you for being here with us today.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Erika Hill. I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia. Just like Dr. Arcuri Sanders, I had to switch to virtual counseling, telemental health as well with my clients. So I definitely had to make that change and that alteration and get that training. So it was definitely a shift for myself. I'm also a doctoral candidate in the counselor education and supervision program at Capella University. And so I have worked with students online. So working with telemental health, this was definitely a big shift, but I'm so glad that we didn't have to abandon our clients. We're able to still meet with them, still provide them support. So I'm looking forward to presenting this with you, Dr. Arcuri Sanders.
Well, I am so glad to have Erika here, especially for you guys to kind of see we don't work together, so we're not using the same approaches. We're working with different populations to try to give you a more broad picture of different ways you can utilize interventions moving forward. I know nobody is on camera, and that is okay. But if you want to just kind of type into the chat, if you're using it, if you're a student, if you're a supervisor, kind of what's your experience with utilizing telemental health, we can kind of gauge, where you guys are at. And kind of maybe make some shifts to address areas and questions that you may have. Also, feel free at any point to, kind of ask us questions. We love to be interactive. We don't want to just talk at you. So send us a chat or chime in. So we're not just, chit-chatting the whole way or, your ears getting a little bored. So without any further ado, I will have kind of Erika share with you a little bit about what we're going to do today, and then we will get started.
Yes, so with this presentation, participants will be able to identify telemental health, the ethical and legal applications. We're also going to share some evidence-based practices, how to creatively implement those with clients, especially our children and adolescent clients. Those clients, sometimes it's hard to keep their attention virtually. So we're definitely going to be sharing different ways that we can support all clients, as well as we'll also share different intervention applications for various client populations. So we'll also be talking about how to work with different client populations, but also how to address cultural and world events that might be happening with our clients. So our presentation is going to hit different topics within telemental health.
Thank you, Erika. And I'm just looking at the chat box right now to trying to give you guys an idea of who we are as a unit here. So lots of people are practicing, our students are in their postdoc program, but many have actually transitioned to telehealth due to the pandemic. So we all kind of were in that same boat together. We also have some supervisors here. So if at any point, guys, that anything comes up where you're like, oh, I have a question about this, or hey, I do it differently, feel free to chime in, share us, those tips of the trade. As we know, we never want to reinvent the wheel. Sharing is caring, and it meets the needs and empowers those clients. So that's what we're all here for, and that's our purpose. So
Yes.
Counseling, distance counseling. And as you guys are noting from your roles, you probably found this this variance in your practice. So, right, counseling in general seeks to empower clients based on their circumstances. So understanding who they are, their strengths, their barriers, meeting them in their here and now, and seeking to improve their well-being, right? That is it in the nutshell. Well, the idea of being in the same space, creating a same space, a non-judgmental place, is very much a cornerstone to the counseling profession. So when distance counseling was introduced, I personally am a certified DCC with distance credential counselor, which years later then became a board certified telemental health provider. They changed the name of it. I kind of had experience, I've dabbled in it, but it wasn't the norm. So I still had that time, or, it would be something kind of a hybrid format when I would meet the clients in one way, face-to-face, really get to know them, and then we would go into that route. So having distance counseling from the beginning, there is this ultimate barrier of space. And I know many people have gone to different sessions today. That has been a common concern. So we're hoping today to address that barrier and really make that space seem almost non-existent, something that we have to acknowledge in how we implement our interventions, but also at the same point, allow it not to impede in our practice. So with distance counseling, there's multiple different ways that you can approach it. So it is a service considered telemental health. If you go back into the history, telemental health has been used in military since like the 1950s. So this is kind of old, just new as a common. So think about, World War II, think about Vietnam, think about some of those things where they were actually transactioning through coded messages, services, not necessarily counseling, but they were using distance approaches to provide treatment to service members in these combat zones. So it's really interesting to see how that has actually, if you really dive deep into the history of it, stemmed into other areas with medical practice and psychology, and then it transitioned to phone counseling and different things like that. So very interesting if that kind of is an area of interest for you to kind of see the timeline of things. I personally have found it pretty unique that some of us are, struggling with this change when in some areas of our world or cultures within our, American world, that it indeed has been embedded in some cultures long standing. So it is more common for certain people to feel more comfortable with this. Counseling can be done asynchronously or synchronously. So asynchronous, we have, text messaging, we have emails. Synchronously, it's more of the video, the audio, it's the conferencing platforms. Something to be cognizant of is when you're thinking of these variances as ethical and legal concerns, which we'll kind of talk about in a few moments. Because if a client is sending you something that needs to be addressed because it is a major crisis or red flag, and it is an email, right? There's a delay in you responding. So they need to be aware of this. So thinking about things like our informed consents or like text messages, right? Someone could text you all hours of the night. Personally, right, we need to set up boundaries. We look at our ethical codes. But once you look at something, even if it was on accident, your email opened on your phone, you are now privy to this information. So you also have ethical and legal obligations to act, even if it's not during your work hours and it is noted in the informed consent. So there's lots of, considerations that we need to be careful of also when using these technologies. Synchronous counseling, we're more in the same space. We can address things that are needed, but crises can occur. So knowing where your clients are, right? In a virtual setting, a client might be doing their session in their own home one day, Well, they might not be in that residence another. So if a situation happens where you need to call emergency services to come to them to maybe do a welfare check, you need to know where they're located. So these are clarifications that need to be set from the beginning, so you are protecting yourself as well as the well-being of your client. So that goes to the last bullet, right? We still have these legal and ethical obligations that we need to oblige by. And when considering these ethical and legal considerations, with the pandemic, things have been changing constantly. So counselors had to, keep that increased attention on that state board website of, what is coming down the pike now? What is HIPAA now saying? And we're going to talk about that just in a quick moment. But I just wanted to highlight to you before we get started why it is so important to consider the need for counseling distance-wise within a pandemic. If you look at these numbers, there has been basically increases in so many different prognoses within the mental health field. So anxiety disorder, depressive disorder, suicidal ideation, all these things have increased. Substance use has increased. So these numbers right here are telling us that in the time when our world is suffering from medical, a pandemic where it's kind of scary and nerve-wracking, anxiety-provoking to go out and interact with each other in the same space, we need to give clients continuity of care. As Erika had mentioned, it was a great way to continue with clients during this time, but also be prepared to work with individuals who have never had counseling before. And we need to be ready to do that and act right away. I know when I had students in their graduate practicum and internship experiences, COVID was coming into play. It was like, we have never seen this. I never thought a pandemic would happen. I've never, prepared for this before. I'm not really sure what to do. And we were all trying to, act as quick as possible. And every state had different protocols. So being with Capella, I have learners that are all over the country. So trying to understand all the different state, what they are requiring, what their guidances are, even areas within each state, some places were able to extend site-based services longer while others did not. Some sites even unfortunately had to shut their doors because they were unable to keep their business operating due to the closure for such a longevity of time. So with that being said, now that we know that it happened and we're seeing these statistics, we have to be prepared to not only continue to meet the needs of clients due to the impact and the long-lasting impact of COVID-19, but if in the event something like this were to occur, again, we need to know what will be needed, not only to meet the needs of the client's well-being, but supervisees, how to support them during this process, and also ourselves. We are human. COVID-19 did impact us as well. We had different structures in our life. We might have had a private place to go provide counseling services. Now we might be giving counseling services from a corner of one of our rooms. We're trying to make it look professional. Maybe virtual background isn't working on our Zoom. What platform works, connectivity. I know in my area, when everyone went homeschooling, it was pretty interesting how quickly the internet slowed down. And I wasn't used to having that slow of an internet because for a long period of time, not many of us were on in this vicinity during that time. So lots and lots of things just to consider when looking at these statistics.
Yes, I definitely have to agree with Dr. Arcuri Sanders. The same thing for me. I have two small children, and so they were home because of COVID-19. And so it was definitely a shift having, my toddler in one room, my 8-year-old in one room, and I'm in another room trying to do counseling sessions. And I'm just praying, everyone stays quiet. And just like Dr. Arcuri said, the Wi-Fi, things of that. So it definitely was a shift for everyone and trying to work with COVID-19 and virtually. So the great thing is we did have some things shift for us in our favor. So while everything around us was shifting and changing, we did have HIPAA shift in our favor. So with that, HIPAA did change some things for counselors. You know, counselors had to quickly implement telemental health with little to no training. And so, like I said earlier, we couldn't just abandon our clients. We couldn't just say, well, COVID-19 happened, this is it. And as we can still see, it's 2021 and we're still dealing with closures. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and the numbers are still going up and down. And so a year later, we would still have to see our clients. So the great thing is HIPAA did change things for healthcare providers. So penalties for noncompliance would not be imposed with regulatory requirements under the HIPAA rules against covered healthcare providers in connection with good faith provision of telehealth. So the OCR, which is the Office of Civil Rights, decided not to impose those penalties, which was a great thing because, again, counselors just had to make that shift out of nowhere. No one knew COVID-19 was going to happen. And so this was a great thing, not only for counselors, but everyone in the healthcare field. But even though things had shifted in our favor when it comes to HIPAA and allowing us to do telemental health, it is still stressed that we still practice ethical and best practices with our clients. And so what that means is we still have to use those evidence-based practices and interventions with our clients. Even though it is a global pandemic, we still have to understand how to implement counseling interventions using a distance platform. So despite many counseling sites still reopening, a lot of clients still want to meet virtually. Not only clients, but even counselors, including myself, still would like to meet virtually. Like I said earlier, I have two small children, and with numbers fluctuating, it's not safe for me to meet with clients face to face. I have to be honest, I had a client one time still come to the counseling session virtually, and they had COVID-19. And all I could think in my head was, I'm thankful we have this computer screen in front of us and we're still able to meet. But it just lets you know that we're still human. And if someone's going through something, they may just still want to meet with their counselor. So it is great that we're still able to meet with them, but we still got to keep it virtual.
So ethically, oh boy, right? This might look a little overwhelming, but I promise you, it's pretty simple in regards to if you're looking at your ACA Code of Ethics, it really is intended to ensure that you understand the platform you're using, that you feel comfortable in meeting with your clients in that way, and that you are confident in ensuring that you can protect them. So yes, this is a new way. So we always have bumps in the road and we're trying to navigate new ways. Well, NBCC actually offers some additional guidances from our ACA Code of Ethics. So for instance, ACA Code of Ethics starts to talk about informed consent and security. Well, NBCC elaborates a little bit further by actually giving you examples, right? So they talk to you about client verification with code words. When they talk to you about confidentiality considerations, they talk to you more in depth about HIPAA, which we just heard from Erika in regards to some of that leeway that we were given with COVID-19. But also the NBCC will allow you to pull from these guidances. You'll see the numbers that correlate to ACA Code of Ethics to help in basically further tighten your informed consent form. Now, a lot of agencies have been so gracious, and I even know a lot of state boards have been able to provide example informed consents to address these changes. So for example, the state that I am in is North Carolina. North Carolina has had distance counseling services for clients for some time. So there was no changes needed, but there was some states where there wasn't clear variance of what distance counseling looked like and if it was actually appropriate. So their state boards had to do some edits to their board, and they had to make some kind of minor acceptances. But also they did direct you to HIPAA and what that looked like. Now, a lot of states, for example, in Texas, there was a mandate that came through that the Texas governor requested that insurance companies allowed for clients to be covered for their distance counseling services the same way as if they were in face-to-face. Because all we know, or many of us, I should have experienced, that a lot of third-party payers, these insurance, and companies would not have reimbursed for that in the beginning. However, now with the longevity that Erika kind of stressed before, many insurance companies are rethinking this and they are addressing it because, right, if things are not addressed when it's happening, problems tend to grow bigger. So, right, it's kind of this balance. So it is a really unfortunate circumstance that it took such a global pandemic to have some of these policies and regulations change. However, it is still important to know that they are continuing to change. So we need to continue to stay up to date on our, state board, but also understand that our licensing professional organizations are offering us support and how to navigate these areas. So once again, ACA and NBCC are great resources in understanding, what needs to be considered ethically, where am I professionally bound, where am I obligated? And, one of the big things that I had mentioned earlier was the idea of like, what if in the event of crisis, your backup plans? NBCC really addresses this. HIPAA also has some great resources for that. I know SAMHSA has also put up some things since COVID-19 that basically addresses different areas that you can put in informed consent. Now, some state boards are requiring certain statements to be noted in their informed consent if you're a practicing provider in their state. Once again, that's state specific. So I don't want to give anyone guidance. That is something that you absolutely want to check with your state board for as things continue to unfortunately change and unfold. As I said, I'm from North Carolina. So some of the requirements in North Carolina is that you must be licensed in the state of North Carolina to provide services to a client in North Carolina, as well as a client who is outside of North Carolina, but you must then seek consultation from that state. So if I have a client who's in North Carolina and they decide to move to Florida, and I would then have to check with Florida to see, is it okay that I can still continue to counsel them from a distance? Now, if I've never met with a client, the same thing is true for a North Carolina licensed counselor, and they are from Georgia, and they say, hey, I would like to meet with you as referred or whatever it might be. Even though if I've never met with them in my state, I would still have to check with the state of Georgia to see if I can counsel them there. Some states have different variances. So once again, make sure that you are checking your state statute or your state policies. I know North Carolina is really nice when you log on to their state board. There's a little, not even a little, it's a big box now that says distance counseling policy. So it is brought to your attention immediately. Something that North Carolina does stress is the fact that the same services that I would provide to my clients in a face-to-face setting must be considered in an electronic or in from a distance manner. So that means that I need to be trained. I need to understand the medium is appropriate. So screening my clients for fit, and also ensuring that I am providing evidence-based treatment for my clients. So that is something to be, cognizant of with your state board. And my state board even goes further to express the need for counselors to be mindful of the nonverbal cues that may get lost in electronic communication. As counselors doing research, doing, professional development, we are mindful of this. Now, not every state is going to put that specifically on their website. So just make sure that you are in tune to that, because it can really change nonverbals. And we're going to give you some examples of how to help address some of those nonverbals in a few moments, because they are so important. And you also have to consider, what if technology fails, all of a sudden the screen goes blank, right? So now you lost the nonverbals. So you need to be cognizant of those things. Also, North Carolina talks about technology and in the informed consent in regards to local emergency services available, which we had mentioned a few moments ago. So without further ado, let's kind of jump into, well, what is platforms out there and how do we use them, and what can you guys do from the moment you walk out of here to feel more comfortable or creative in doing it?
Yes. So Zoom has become, I think, my best friend, a lot of healthcare professionals' best friend. Zoom has been so helpful as we see we're on Zoom now. The great thing about Zoom is I love that they provide a HIPAA compliance PDF. So it gives you a chance to really read over it, make sure it aligns with what your state requires, make sure it aligns with your counseling practices. And so just reading over that just allows you to feel more secure, so that way you can let your client know that their confidentiality is protected. Another great thing with Zoom is they do provide different plans and pricing. I do know they did last year send out a different pricing plan because of COVID-19 and because so many healthcare providers had to use Zoom. They provide pricing discounts. So I definitely say if you check one time and the pricing is just too expensive, please check back again. Definitely sign up for email alerts because they send out new things, promo codes, discount codes, because they know so many people are using Zoom right now. Another great thing about Zoom is you can use it on your computer, your smartphone, your tablet. There's telephone options. So it really allows the client to do it in so many different ways. For example, I have a client that likes to meet in the park. Now, they do use their headphones to protect their own confidentiality, but allows them to have it in a free space and allows them to be out in nature. And so we're able to communicate that way. Another great thing about, with that telephone option is you may have clients with severe anxiety when it comes to using a video. For example, I have a client that with being on video, it triggers some other things that they are dealing with. And so what we do is we keep the video option off, but we still communicate audio and use the chat. So it allows us to still have that counseling session without making the client feel uncomfortable or feel they have to go outside of their boundaries or their limits to meet with me. So that is the great thing about Zoom, that it does provide so many different options to meet with your client. One thing to consider though is Zoom does indicate that recordings are compliant. However, it does not clarify if they're able to listen to your recordings later. So when you do press the recording option, it will give you the option to either download it to your computer or to the cloud. However, it doesn't specify if they're still able to have access to those recordings. And so when we still think about HIPAA and we still think about confidentiality, please do keep that in mind if you do decide to record your sessions, that it is possible that a third party can listen to it.
Thank you, Erica, for stressing that. I just want to jump in real fast and just share with everyone that, so we're going to be focusing our session today on Zoom because this has kind of been the popular one. And even in the conference today, we're using Zoom. But there are other platforms out there, Simple Praxis, DoxyMe, other platforms that are accordance with HIPAA as well. But just want to let you know, this is why we're doing what we do today. However, a lot of these platforms have some of the same features that we're going to be talking about today. So we hope that whatever platform you're using, if it is not Zoom, that you would be able to take something from here as well and apply it in those platforms as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And like Dr. Arcuri Sanders said, any platform that you use, it doesn't mean that you have to stick with Zoom. We just definitely want to give an option because honestly, this is a way for us all to stay competent within this job market. A lot of things have changed. And so the best thing that we can do is just be aware of different platforms. So in no way, shape, or form are we saying you have to stick with Zoom. Another great thing of Zoom, as I talk about Zoom, right, is the security feature that is provided. So you do have the option of using an invitation only link. And so you can either email it to the client directly from Zoom, or you can copy the link. I personally like to copy the link and send it in an email to my client. I like to do a different link each time we meet. And this is just a personal preference to just really protect their confidentiality. I don't think, for me personally, I don't like to use the same link just in case someone else has access to that old email. They can take that link and let's just say they try to log on. So I try to send them a new link each time we meet. And that's honestly your preference on how you would like to do that with your clients. Another security feature is a passcode. Now, before Zoom did not require you to do a passcode. However, this past year, it is now a requirement. And you can do something simple for your password. For example, I use the word session. It's something simple, something the client can remember. You know, you don't want to make it too hard to where they're having to remember their password. We have to keep in mind that this might be this client's first time meeting in counseling, so they may be nervous. Some may be apprehensive of even doing counseling, and then they're getting on and now they're frantic. They can't remember the password and log off. So I definitely recommend with joining a password, joining something simple that the client can just link on without any complications. And yes, I'm so sorry. I'm looking at the chat. I do see someone mentioning BetterHelp. Yes, BetterHelp is another virtual platform that is a great way for you to meet with clients. And the great thing about BetterHelp is you can actually chat with that client on that platform. You don't have to do it off that platform. So you can chat with them, meet with them video and phone. So thank you so much, James, for mentioning that.
Well, to continue on that idea of how do we protect those clients, we can also have waiting rooms. So after they come in, we can actually verify them in a waiting room. So maybe, we talk a little about, make sure, that's who they are, make sure that they're in a safe place, they feel comfortable to talk. Sometimes clients forget, or they say, I don't care if my husband hears, and we have to readdress with them about, sometimes this is information that comes up that maybe is more personal, or maybe you're not going to feel as comfortable sharing. But we want to readdress what confidentiality looks like for them during this time. Also, a waiting room is a great place if you're working on families, couples, groups, right? You can then get them all into the room at the same time. You might be able to move somebody out. Another situation that has occurred sometimes with clients for me is there is a time where sometimes a client has anxiety in regards to kind of joining in a session for talking about things that are uncomfortable, right? Clients come to counseling usually because there's something going on that is creating some kind of disequilibrium in their life. And it's not because they're there to tell you about all the happy things in their life. So sometimes waiting in a waiting room, having small chat about, how's the weather, how's your day? All right, are you ready to get into the session and jump in and catch up from where we were last week, has also provided them with a little kind of breath of fresh air of, okay, we've reconnected, I'm okay, I've caught my breath, I'm ready to go. Every client is different, okay? So that's another thing I want to, share with you. So, right, and I see Google Voice, could that be HIPAA compliant medium? I also hear secure video option there. So Google Voice, there has been, I know, some conversation about the HIPAA compliance in regards to, it has kind of gone up and down. Like Google Meet rooms or the Google rooms, I know there was kind of a couple things where they called it Google bombing. I know Zoom has bombing, they call it, where people have come in. It really takes us as a clinician to put the extra steps in. So some of these platforms say they are HIPAA compliant, but you need to do certain things to continue to protect the client. So for instance, like Erika said, she changes the room. So if it got to somebody's email address before someone else doesn't access it, or if there was a situation where, let's say it's a domestic violence situation, and the spouse got a hold of the email, now they can overhear things. We need to be monitoring how many participants are in the room, how many people are on camera. Just because they're not on camera doesn't mean that there isn't somebody else in there. So being cognizant of that. Also, you can see who's called in. So somebody on the line who's not on camera, using passcodes, right? So I'm going to get a little bit further into this. And you can, actually, if you have a waiting room, you can also block a room once it's done. So once you came into your room, you have your client, you can lock it so no one else can access it. So, and I'm seeing comments about the chat area. Can you chat with someone in the waiting room? So you have a chat option. And when you're in the waiting room, you'll have a same kind of chat option in that waiting room as well. And you would be able to, on the bottom, when you open up your chat, and I'll show you some of that in a little bit, there's a link that says to, and it's a drop down menu. And like, for instance, right now mine says to everyone, which means everyone in the meeting room. It talks to the monitor of the meeting room. I can talk to them specifically. And then I can also talk to each individual participant where no one else would have access to that. So you do have options in the waiting room as well as in the room, and also in breakout rooms, which we will get to momentarily. So toolbar exploration. So when you are in Zoom, there's all these things on the bottom where it gives you different options. One of the things is you have unmute and video. So let's say you're doing a couple session and one person is just the other couple, and they are not hearing you, and you're saying, you know, let's take a moment. You know, we need to hear from the, you know, the other person. You have the ability to mute them. So you as the host also have access to controlling things, to monitor things, right? We don't have that in person. We can't be like mute, right? Doesn't work, right? We still have to work through that, but here we do. And sometimes that can help where, you know, the other person is not hearing all of the negative things, where we don't always have that in person. So right, plus and benefits, risk and benefits of everything. We also have options here for the microphone. If we don't want it through our computer, if they have a personal microphone, this also allows us to work with some of the ADA compliances, as there is various assistances to meet needs of those who need accessibility options. I am not an expert in that area. I personally have to reach out to my disability services to kind of connect with them. Now, I know Zoom does work with you. If you have a specific question about, you know, a disability that needs need, they do have helpful resources to help you navigate what other options are out there for you. With the video, so when you click video, you have all these options. You can have different cameras. So for instance, in my room, currently, I have one on, I'm using my computer camera right now, but I also have a camera on a tripod, because when I push back my seat and I want to do more what you can see my whole body, and we're focusing on like muscle relaxation and going through, or maybe mindfulness, or doing other exercises where I want also my client to be in tune to their nonverbals, by them sometimes seeing me modeling certain things is very helpful to them. So I have two different cameras that I can choose from. When I have my other camera, it would be up here and I would just click on that one. The same is true for many clients that sometimes they're using their smartphone and then they're connecting to another offset with Bluetooth. All the technology is amazing right now. I will also show you another example later where you can use your iPods, or now there's all different kinds where you do not need to be connected to the computer. You can be sitting way back there and you can still hear me because they are Bluetooth earphones. So lots of great things to kind of talk about with technology. Virtual background, video filters, video settings, all different things here that you can do. Virtual background is really neat for some of the different interventions we're going to talk about in a few moments, because it can help them with finding that safe place. You know, talking about the miracle question, you know, what would your safe place look like? Well, upload that background. We're in that, you know, we're kind of infusing ourselves into that space. Also a great way to incorporate nature when many people were quarantined, whether it was quarantined because they had contact with somebody, or they lived in an area where they were kind of being regulated, where they could not leave certain places, because in some areas, right, going to a park was great, but in other areas, parks were closed. So that is something to consider where your client is located. Other options here, you'll see there is security options. So you as the host, as the one running the room, have an ability, like I said, to lock the meeting, enable a waiting room. You have the ability to share screens. You can tell them if you want them to have that ability. You can take it away by unchecking it. You can have a chat box. You cannot have a chat box. You can have them rename themselves. You cannot have, you can have it where once they have their name, that's it, and they can't, you know, touch their name. If a participant, let's say you have a group setting, is, you know, creating havoc in your group, you can remove a participant. If somebody tries to bomb your room, you can report them. And bomb means basically uninvited. If they was like a hacker of some sort was coming in, or somebody, you know, access somebody's email, even if it was a friend or whatever, you could make a report. Different things you can do there. That participant number I was talking about tells you, you click on that little side button and it'll actually tell you who's in the room logged in computer wise, or who's in the room logged in by phone. It'll have a little tablet next to their name, and it'll also let you know what phone numbers you're calling in. You can make these things visual to participants, or you can only have access to them. So these are all things when you go into the settings, you can really look at, do I want my participant, my client, to be able to do that or not? So the chat box here, you can share a screen, which will show you different things in a few moments. You record, same thing that Erika mentioned before, got to be careful with recording because of, we don't know exactly who has access to it according to Zoom's information on their website, in which, it's kind of clear, but not clear. You have to read through those lines a little bit, and no clear answer has been noted from them in regards to if they have access to that cloud. The other aspect with record, I will say that a benefit is a great way if you're practicing something with your client, either a role play, or you're doing like an empty chair technique, or you're doing exposure therapy. It's a great way to record it and have them revisit it. It also can provide them with a reflection of how far they've come. Also a nice way for the supervisees, if you're working as a supervisor with counselors in training, or those in their licensure, or those just seeking supervision, as kind of a checking as our professional journey continues, to have that reflection piece. So lots of different things you can do. Closed captions, ADA, right? Talking about those that maybe have difficulty with hearing. Well, as you're talking, closed captions can come up. Also, I know the mask, currently I have a mask where it's for hearing impaired, so if I was out in a setting, if I was outside at a park, or outside, and I need to have a mask on where I was located, it's clear, so you can actually see all of my mouth. So that is something that's been really important for those who need the lip reading visual cue. So that's just kind of an FYI if you're in a setting that requires you to have a mask on. In breakout rooms. So if you have a group and maybe you want to go into small groups and kind of talk about different things, this is also really cool to do when you're doing supervision sessions, where you can send people in different rooms and you're in control of where people go and how long they are and when to bring them back. So virtual background. And I tried to do this, so I'm actually acting for you as the client, and I have myself at the top as the counselor. I can make the client bigger, so they have the focus. We could be side by side. You can really do tons of different things with how you want the video to look. However, so this is my backyard. It's kind of my peaceful place, right? So I uploaded a virtual background. If I was going to be working on like a mindfulness exercise, this would be something that would be comforting to me. Or maybe I could tell you at one point that backyard was not comforting when I had to get it to look that way. And I was laying sod for what seemed like months, right? So maybe that could be a highlight of showing you where my struggle is. So that is different ways where you can use the technology, where you can kind of jump into where the client is and they can share more with you. Now, progressive muscle relaxation, even having a background like that, right? Bringing them to a safe place that they feel comfortable. And that could be something they upload from Google, could be their own picture. I had a client before actually draw something. They are very artistic, and that's kind of what it was kind of a childhood memory. They couldn't find any pictures, but that's how they remembered that place, and they uploaded it and they used it as their backdrop. And we did muscle relaxation exercises in there, as well as with guided imagery. So with the virtual background, right, I just kind of explained to you some of the different ways you can do it, but I want to just stress to you, you can do this on your smartphone, you can do this on your PC, a tablet, an iPad. Zoom is very adaptable for that. Not every single platform is going to be adaptable for all those types of devices. So it's something you're going to have to look into in regards to, what platform you would like to use. But for Zoom, you can, which is very helpful for clients that are kind of on the go, or maybe the kiddos are at home and they're homeschooling and, you know, school has been shut again and they still want to have their session and they're going into a room, but their, you know, child is on their computer. Well, they can just bring their phone and now they can continue with the session. So I'm going to turn it over to Erika to talk a little bit about some sharing screen options. And I am cognizant of time, so we're just going to kind of brush through as much as we can and then open up for questions and comments.
Yes, so with share screen, and I'll touch on this briefly, not many platforms have this option. With Zoom, they do, and this is a great way for you to go over certain things with your client right in the session. So for example, if we're talking about career counseling, this is a great resource using the shared screen option, going over their resume, reviewing jobs together. This is a great way that you guys can go through this together, because looking for jobs can be an anxious task to do, especially for clients that are feeling hopeless about finding employment, especially with COVID-19. You know, there's a lot of negativity when it comes to will jobs be available for people. And so when you're going over career options, it can be a sensitive subject. So being able to go through it in the counseling session, you can provide that support and help them to establish goals while in the moment. Another thing with this shared screen option for psychoeducation. So you're able to share services, information, sharing how to join something. For clients that have issues with phobias, you can walk through something with them. So it provides that way for you to interact with your client. Another thing is you can actually share sound. So for those who like to implement sound therapy within their sessions using a sound bowl or meditation resources or tools within your session. Great thing with this option is you're able to share the sound with your client. And last but not least, if you like to provide homework activities for your clients, this is a great way to go over that. So for example, certain homework activities I like to give my clients are journal prompts, or, you know, writing in their journal. And so sometimes it can be hard for the client to write in their journal and then have to read it to you. You know, it's almost like rehashing those same feelings. So they're able to upload that journal entry on the screen, and I can read it myself and talk through it with them without them having to retell what they wrote. Another great thing is sometimes clients like to just bullet their thoughts. And so they like to list them out instead of writing a whole journal entry. And so when they have that shared screen option, we can go through each bullet. And this not only allows them to get all of what they want to talk about, but let's think about those talking points. You know, sometimes a client can just sit there and not say anything. And so as counselors, we might get stuck. So this is a great way where you can say, hey, well, I noticed we haven't touched on this. Let's talk about this. So having that shared screen option, not only does it provide that interaction, it can provide those talking points, it can provide that support. So it's a great thing to use with your clients.
And just to piggyback on Erika, so that idea that they can share with you, there's two things to consider with that too. So like in our chat box for this session here for the conference, there's a file share option. So they can actually share with you the file where you would be able to keep it as part of kind of, you know, your counseling notes. Or what they can do is you can give them access to upload it themselves, and you wouldn't have the file. So that would be from their computer shared with you. And if you don't record the session, the only people that would see it is you two, but there'd be nothing transferred to consider. So that is kind of when you're thinking about HIPAA and so forth. The file option is a great way for you to also share resources with them. That can also be accessed in the settings when you sign up for your account in Zoom. When you do like your profile, say account settings, you can click on all those different things that you would like or not like. And so one of the things that Erika was talking about, you know, you can share different things, whether it's homework assignments, you could do it together, talking points. This is an example of implementing narrative therapy with letters. You can see both clients on the side, perhaps it was homework, and you were talking about that letter together. Narrative therapy really talks about reauthoring. So you can actually put track changes on. Have the client change it in the moment with you as you are processing different things, possibly going through irrational thoughts, right? What does that look like? Or after things have been learned, and comparing letters along the way from drafts. So great way to share it. You can still see yourself on the screen, you can still hear yourself, but you can do something simultaneously. Also, I know a lot of people use Google Docs. All right, you do have some HIPAA issues with that. If there's something where you do like a Google Doc where it's just between you two and it's password protected, that's an extra, layer of something. If that's something you want to do, you both have access to it. Personally, for me, I try to empower my clients to kind of be the ones working at it. I can help guide and assist them, but I want them to be doing, I don't want to be doing all the work. But some clients might need a little help because maybe they're not as comfortable with technology. So you might have to start somewhere, get them used to it, and then turn them over there. So this is kind of what I was talking about before with being able to push your chair away. So just thought therapy using the empty chair technique. Now, if a client had those ear pods in, right, they could sit their phone down somewhere and I can see them and I can hear them from afar because the mic is built in. So we can actually set up an empty chair like that. And I am in their session doing it with them. Or we could do something where we upload a picture, show me what your boss looks like. And you can actually have it there, or you can just, put an empty box there even, and label it the name that they want to talk to. So lots of different things you can use using these share screen options. This is a whiteboard where before was where you were actually, let me go back real fast. This is just 2 videos. Here was uploading a document right from the share screen. So supplemental materials, Erika had also mentioned this before, right? You can actually go onto a website, walk through it, as she had said, great also for career counseling, different things. But this is through the share screen option. Again, you would share your browser and you would be able to go to the website. You can give your access to your client to share with you what they're doing, or if you can bring it up, they can tell you where to go and you can share it that way. One thing I want to be cognizant of when I'm doing that is the other browsers that are open. If I have anything personal up here, I wouldn't want that during my session to be seen. And you would want to remind your client of that as well. So virtual background, right? I told you before, is a great way for you to kind of set your tone of where you are. There's even embedded ones in Zoom. You can use that in terms of exposure therapy, but I wanted to point out to you the number of ways you can use exposure therapy using most of the tools that Zoom offers. So, right, you can use that website, read about it together, kind of talk about it. If they have the fear of snakes, for instance, you can bring a picture, right? Look at the snake. You can watch a video together, process it together. You can share resources. Oh, and I actually just saw somebody, Erika just wrote that in there, right? You could share those resources together. The virtual, and you can share the noise so they can hear the sound through your computer. A virtual trip you can actually take even on your smartphone. They can even go to the store and take you with them. All right, if that was the next step in their thing, it just keeps going. They can touch an animal. You could be part of it even though you're not together in the same space. I wanted to just give this kind of easy example because you can get really, really creative using these different tools, specifically with platforms that have a lot of access to different modalities in regards to, cell phone, all different things that way. So with that whiteboard also, when you share your screen, right, you can actually process it together. Let's say we're doing reality therapy. We're looking at, what do you want right now? Let's really define this. Great way to also collaborate on treatment planning. Let them see those goals, look at them, reevaluate them, scaling questions, right? It's a great way not only to define them, what does the scale look like? Let's define it together, but also where are you today? Let's check on this. You can revisit it. You can kind of have an ongoing timeline of it. You can get really, really, really creative with it.
Yes. So as we're talking about different interventions with working with clients, we have to definitely be mindful that not only are we dealing with COVID-19, we're also dealing with so many cultural and world events. And so we still have to support our clients through this. So these are just different things that can help when having to address serious issues like this. So, for example, having awareness on cultural and world issues. So, in no way am I saying that, hey, you need to always watch the news because, sometimes that can be a lot nowadays, right? But it is very necessary and important for counselors to be aware of what is going on around them. For example, we had a shooting in Atlanta that affected the Asian community. And so I had to meet with a client of Asian descent that next day. So being aware, and just being mindful of what's going on can provide that support. Another thing is a situation happened with the riot at the Capitol. And for that situation, I actually had sessions that entire day. So I didn't even know it was happening until, I'm sorry, I do see the time. So I'll definitely speed this up. But I didn't even know that this was happening until I was in the session. And so in that moment, I really didn't know what was going on. The client told me. And so I just had to listen. Don't pretend that you know. It's just best to provide that active listening, to provide that empathy and support them that way. Another thing is countertransference. We have to be mindful of that. And that's just the same way as we meet with our clients face to face. You got to practice that definitely virtually. So be mindful not to allow your personal feelings to interrupt the counseling session. So my best advice for that is to practice self-care. Definitely check in with yourself, see where you are, see where your mindset is at. And if it's just, hey, I need to reschedule, go ahead and reschedule before damaging that counseling relationship. So these are just ways on how you can work with these clients virtually as the world still happens around us.
And I know because of time, I'm just going to highlight these two to you. Here's just some notes that you can do with children, adolescents. We kind of talked about sharing them using the share option using Zoom. And also right now, there's a lot of resources available for free because of the pandemic. So for instance, you can share a screen and you guys can build a sand tray together. And the online sandtray.com is currently free by Karen Fried. And it's a great way to use even an expressive art therapy within a virtual setting. I know we're out of time pretty much, and I know we talked and we're so grateful for all the chat dialogue. I will go back to the front so you guys have our email addresses in case you have any questions or want to contact us at any point, but we would love to hear from you. Sure, we can share the presentation. And the free sand tray is onlinesandtray.com. And I'll type it in here.
Okay.
www.onlinesandtray.com. Sure, we can put our email address in the chat as well.
And I'll also send, this is another one of the sand tray links as well.
Thank you, Erika. Well, thank you guys so much for being here with us and spending your morning, afternoon, wherever you're located. I know Erika and I, this is something, we've been very excited about as, the world is making this our new normal. So kind of creating a team and a unit to make this easier and more enjoyable, not only for ourselves, but our clients. It's kind of the wave of the future. So we really appreciate you guys being here with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye.
Bye.